it smells so good. Look, Mommy, the bread. Can we get some?
My ex-wife whispered, "Let's go. We can't pay." But her little girl pressed her tiny nose against my bakery's glass case and asked the 5 words that shattered 7 years of silence. "Can we just smell it first?" I'm Caleb Rourke, and I own the small-town bakery they walked into that Friday evening, but my ex-wife Ellie had no idea the man behind the counter was the husband she divorced 7 years ago. And I had no idea the 6-year-old girl in worn-out shoes, begging just to smell a strawberry birthday cake her mother couldn't pay for, was about to turn my entire world upside down. Ellie stood there in a coat 2 winters too old, counting pennies that weren't enough, too proud to beg, ready to walk her daughter out hungry on her birthday. But the moment I heard that whisper, "We can't pay," I stepped out from behind that counter and made a decision that would unravel a secret buried for 7 long years. Because that little girl looked up at me with eyes I could have sworn I'd seen before, and said something no stranger's child should ever know. "You smell like my mom's picture box." Why did my ex-wife go pale and grab her daughter's hand the second she saw my face? What was really hidden inside that picture box the little girl mentioned? Why would a mother too broke to pay for a birthday cake move to the one town where her ex-husband owned a bakery? And who was the father of the little girl who just wanted to smell what her mother couldn't afford? Stay till the end, because the truth behind that whisper, "Let's go, we can't pay," is not what you think. And what this little girl's simple question uncovered will break your heart before it heals it. It was 6:45 on a Friday evening in October in Maple Falls, Ohio. 15 minutes to closing. The kind of cold outside that makes bakery windows fog up like breath on a mirror. I was in the back, stacking bread trays, flour up to my elbows, when I heard the bell above my door ring. I almost called out, "We're closing." I didn't, and thank God I didn't, because then I heard a voice, a woman's voice, tired, soft, careful. The voice of someone who apologizes for taking up space. "Just for a minute, baby, then we have to go." I stopped breathing. 7 years. 7 years since I'd heard that voice. And I would have known it in a hurricane. I would have known it underwater. I would have known it in my sleep, because for the first 2 of those 7 years, that's exactly where I heard it every single night. Ellie. My hands went cold. My heart went loud. I stood frozen behind the bread rack, like a thief in my own bakery, and I looked through the gap between the trays. And there she was, my ex-wife, standing in front of my display case, in a gray coat that was at least 2 winters too old, with a button missing and a sleeve fraying at the wrist. Her hair was pulled back the way she used to wear it when she was stressed about money. Her face was thinner. Her eyes had shadows under them that hadn't been there when she was mine. But it was her. It was Ellie, and kneeling next to her, with her little nose pressed flat against the glass of my display case, was a girl. Small, maybe 5, maybe 6. Brown curls escaping from under a knit hat, a puffy pink jacket with a zipper that didn't close all the way, and shoes. I want you to hear this part, because it broke something in me. Her little sneakers were worn through at the toes. Not scuffed, worn through. The kind of worn that means those shoes had been walked in long after they should have been replaced. The kind of worn a mother notices every single day and can't do a single thing about. The little girl was staring at one thing and one thing only. The strawberry cream cake. Top shelf, center of the case. 3 layers, whipped cream frosting. Fresh strawberries fanned across the top like a crown. I make one every Friday. Don't ask me why. I'll tell you later. And when I do, it's going to hurt. The little girl's breath was fogging the glass. Her hands were pressed flat beside her face. She was looking at that cake the way other kids look at Christmas morning. "Mommy," she whispered. "That one. That's the one. The strawberry one." And I watched Ellie do the math. You know the math I'm talking about. Some of you watching have done this math. That math where a mother looks at a price card, then looks at her phone, then looks at her purse, and her lips move slightly, adding, subtracting, hoping, and then her shoulders drop. Ellie's shoulders dropped exactly the way they did on the worst night of our marriage. I'll tell you about that night too, but not yet. She knelt down next to her daughter. She put her arm around that puffy pink jacket and she whispered. She thought no one could hear, but a bakery at closing time is quiet as a church. "Let's go, baby. We can't pay. 4 words. 4 words, and I felt them like 4 punches. But the little girl didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't stomp her feet like kids do. She turned her face up to her mother, and with the most polite, most hopeful, most heartbreaking little voice I have ever heard in my life, she asked, "Can we just smell it first? Can we just smell it first? Friends, I have been broke. I have slept in my car. I have eaten expired bread and called it dinner. I thought I knew what rock bottom sounded like. I was wrong. Rock bottom is a 6-year-old girl in worn-out shoes asking permission to smell a birthday cake her mother can't afford. My feet moved before my brain gave permission. I came around that bread rack, through the kitchen door, out behind the counter, wiping flour on my apron, and I opened my mouth to say something kind, something easy, something a stranger says. And then Ellie looked up. I watched the color leave her face. I watched it drain from her cheeks like someone pulled a plug. Her eyes went wide, and in one single second I saw shock, then recognition, then something that looked terrifyingly close to fear. She grabbed her daughter's hand. "Maisie, we're leaving. Now. Maisie." Her name was Maisie. "But Mommy, now. Baby." She pulled that little girl toward my door so fast the child's worn-out sneakers squeaked on my floor. Her hand was on the handle. The bell was about to ring. 7 years of silence were about to walk back out into the October cold, and I knew in my bones that if that door closed, I would never see her again. So I said the only thing that came out. "It's on the house." Ellie froze. "Birthday rule," I said. My voice was shaking, and I prayed she couldn't hear it. "House policy. Every kid gets a free cake on their birthday. It's written down somewhere." It was not written down anywhere. I invented that policy exactly 1.5 seconds earlier. Maisie spun around, and her whole face lit up like a sunrise. "How did you know it's my birthday?" I looked at that little girl's face, really looked at it for the first time, and something whispered at the back of my skull. Something I couldn't name yet. Those eyes, deep brown, with little flecks of gold near the center. I'd seen those eyes before. I'd seen them in a mirror. No, I shut the thought down, slammed the door on it, because that thought was impossible, and hoping for impossible things is how a man gets destroyed twice. "Lucky guess," I said, and I smiled at her. 6, right? 6, she announced, holding up all 5 fingers on one hand, then adding a 6th after a quick recount. "Today, since 11 o'clock in the morning." Well then, I walked to the case. My hands were trembling, and I hid it by grabbing the cake board with both palms. 11 o'clock this morning, you officially earned yourself a strawberry cream cake. Maisie. Ellie's voice was quiet, strained, stretched thin as wire. "We can't accept. It's policy," I said, not looking at her, because I couldn't look at her. "You wouldn't want me to break my own policy. Very bad for business." Silence. The kind of silence where a whole war gets fought inside one woman's chest. Pride on one side, her daughter's shining face on the other. I know Ellie Hayes. I know her pride. That woman would walk 10 miles in the snow before she'd owe anybody a nickel. Her pride was the strongest thing in 3 counties. But it wasn't stronger than her daughter's smile. "Thank you," she said finally. 2 words. She said them to my shoulder, to the wall, to the floor, anywhere but my eyes. "That's very kind of you." Of you, like I was a stranger. Like she hadn't stood in a courthouse with me. Like she hadn't fallen asleep on my chest 1,000 nights. Like the word Caleb had been deleted from her mouth. It cut me in half, and I let it. Because whatever was happening here, whatever had put that fear in her eyes and those holes in that little girl's shoes, I understood one thing instantly. If I pushed, I'd lose her. Again. Forever this time. So I boxed the cake. Slowly. Buying seconds. White box, gold ribbon, the works. Maisie narrated the entire operation like a sports announcer. "He's putting the string on it. Mommy, look, it has a window on top. You can see the strawberries through the window." And Ellie stood by my door, with her arms wrapped around herself, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Or maybe I could read it, and I was too afraid to, because it looked like grief. It looked like a woman staring at a ghost. I slid the box across the counter. Maisie took it with both hands, like I was handing her the crown jewels of England. And then Ellie did something that told me everything about the last 7 years of her life. She stepped forward, dug into her coat pocket, and pressed a $20 bill onto my counter. The bill was soft. You hear me? Soft. Worn like fabric. Folded and unfolded so many times it didn't crinkle anymore. That was a 20 that had been counted 100 times. Saved. Guarded. That 20 was groceries. That 20 was gas. That 20 was somebody's emergency. I pay for what we take, she said. And for 1 second, 1 single second, her eyes met mine. And inside them I saw the whole 7 years. I saw exhaustion. I saw battles I knew nothing about. I saw a fortress built brick by brick, and a sign on the gate that said, "No one gets in ever again." Ellie, her name escaped me, out loud. After 7 years, she flinched like I'd struck a match near her face. "Have a good night," she said, and turned to the door. "Maisie, say thank you." But Maisie was already at the door, hugging her cake box, and she turned around one last time. She tilted her little head. She studied me with those gold-flecked eyes, that 6-year-old X-ray stare that sees straight through every wall adults spend their lives building. And then she said it. "You smell like my mom's picture box." Time stopped. I promise you, the clocks in that bakery stopped ticking. "Her what?" I whispered. "Her picture box," Maisie said, matter of fact, like she was telling me the sky was blue. "The shoebox in her closet. It smells like this whole store. Like the sweet bread smell. Mommy doesn't know, but sometimes I open it and smell it and look at the pictures of the man with less beard." "Maisie." Ellie's voice cracked like ice on a pond. She had the door open. The cold poured in. "Now, please, now." The bell rang. The door closed. And through my fogged-up front window, I watched my ex-wife walk away into the dark with a little girl I couldn't stop staring at. Maisie skipping over sidewalk cracks with her cake box held high, Ellie moving fast, head down, once, just once, glancing back over her shoulder at my window before disappearing around the corner of Birch Street. And I stood alone in my empty bakery, in the smell of sugar and warm bread, holding a $20 bill soft as cloth, a picture box, a shoebox that smelled like a bakery, pictures of a man with less beard. I hadn't always had this beard. 7 years ago, I was clean-shaven. 7 years ago, when I mailed a certain woman 12 letters that were never answered, 12 letters that, as far as I knew, she'd read and burned. I looked down at the display case, at the empty spot where the strawberry cream cake had been, and I finally let myself think the thing I'd been slamming doors on since the moment that little girl smiled at me. The strawberry cream cake, in my case, wasn't just a cake. I bake one every Friday because 17 years ago, a broke 21-year-old kid married the love of his life in a church basement, and the only cake they could afford was strawberry cream, the cheapest one in the shop that still looked fancy. Ellie cried when she saw it. "Happy tears," she said. "One day we'll be able to afford any cake we want, and I'll still choose this one." And tonight her daughter, a little girl who turned 6 years old today, in October, pressed her nose against my glass and chose that exact cake out of 14 options without a second of hesitation. 6 years old, I walked to the calendar hanging by my register. I stared at it, and against every ounce of my own will, my mind started doing math. Terrible math. Impossible math. The kind of math that ends marriages or resurrects them. The divorce was final 7 years ago, in late February. Maisie turned 6 today, in October. I stood there with flour on my hands and my heart slamming against my ribs, counting months on my fingers like a madman. Forward and back, forward and back. And every single time, the numbers landed in a place that made the room spin. No, it couldn't be. She would have told me. No woman hides something like that for 7 years. Not Ellie. Not the woman I knew. But then again, the woman I knew wouldn't be wearing a coat with a missing button. The woman I knew wouldn't have shadows like bruises under her eyes. The woman I knew wouldn't look at me, Caleb, the man she once promised forever, with fear. Something had happened to Ellie Hayes in those 7 years. Something big enough to bring her to Maple Falls, Ohio, a town she had no family in, no history in, no reason to be in, no reason except one bakery, and one man, and 12 letters with a return address printed in the corner. I flipped my sign to closed. I turned off the lights. And I sat down alone in the dark at the little table by the window, the table where, every Friday for 5 years, an unsold strawberry cream cake had quietly gone home with me or gone to the church pantry, because I could never bring myself to stop making it. And I said out loud, to nobody, to the dark, to the smell of sugar in the air, "Whose little girl are you, Maisie?" I didn't know it yet, but across town, in a rented duplex with a radiator that barely worked, my ex-wife was about to sit down on her bedroom floor, pull a shoebox out of her closet, and open a secret that was going to answer my question, and shatter both of our hearts before it healed them. I didn't learn what I'm about to tell you until months later. Ellie told me some of it in a bakery kitchen at midnight. Maisie told me some of it without knowing she was telling me anything. And some of it I read with my own 2 hands, sitting at my work table, in envelopes sealed with my own spit 7 years before. But you need to hear it now. Because while I sat alone in my dark bakery that Friday night, doing terrible math on my fingers, across town, in a rented duplex on Corbin Street, with a radiator that clanked like a dying man, my ex-wife was sliding down her bedroom wall to the floor with a cake box on the kitchen counter and a hurricane in her chest. Ellie Hayes had just seen a ghost, and the ghost had given her daughter a birthday cake. She'd gotten Maisie fed, sung happy birthday, with 1 candle stolen from a drawer of odds and ends, watched her little girl eat 2 slices of strawberry cream cake with her eyes closed, actually closed, savoring it like a prayer, and then tucked her in under 2 blankets because the heat in that duplex only reached the living room. And then Ellie walked into her own bedroom, shut the door without a sound, opened her closet, and reached up to the top shelf. The shoebox. Old, brown. A men's size 11 shoebox from a store that didn't exist anymore. The corners were soft from being handled. There was a rubber band around it that had been replaced 3 times in 7 years. She sat down on the floor with it in her lap, and for a long time, she didn't open it. She just held it. The way you hold something that can hurt you, because here is what was inside that box. And here is where I need you to sit still, because this is the part of the story that nobody in it deserved. On top, photographs. A younger me, clean-shaven, just like Maisie said. Me laughing at a cookout. Me asleep on a couch with a dog we borrowed from a neighbor for a weekend and cried about returning. Me and Ellie in a church basement, 21 and 23 years old, cutting a strawberry cream cake, the cheapest one in the shop that still looked fancy, with her mascara running from happy tears and my tie borrowed from her uncle. And underneath the photographs, tied together with kitchen string, 12 envelopes. 11 of them had never been opened. 12 letters, 1 per month, for the entire first year after our divorce. All in my handwriting, all addressed to Ellie, all mailed to the house she'd moved into with her mother. And Ellie had only known they existed for 11 months. Now let me take you back, because to understand that shoebox, you have to understand the night everything died. And I'm going to tell you the truth about that night, including the parts where I was the villain. Because I was. That's the thing about this story. For 7 years, both of us thought the other one was the villain, and we were both wrong. But I was wrong first. 8 years ago, I lost my job. The plant closed. 200 men walked out with cardboard boxes, and I was one of them. And here's what I did with that news. Are you ready? I hid it. Every morning for 4 months, I put on my work boots, kissed my wife, and drove away like a man going to a job that no longer existed. I sat in parking lots. I filled out applications in a library. I did day labor for cash when I could get it. And when I couldn't cover the gap, I quietly pulled money out of our savings account. The account we'd built $5 at a time for 6 years. The someday account, the house account, the baby account. And I moved it into the checking, so the bills would clear and Ellie would never see a ripple. Why? You want to know why a man does something that stupid? Pride. The same disease that would one day put worn-out shoes on my own daughter's feet. I grew up watching my father fail and my mother carry it, and I swore my wife would never carry me. I thought I was protecting her. I thought I'd fix it before she ever felt the cold. I wasn't protecting her. I was lying to her. Every kiss goodbye was a lie. 4 months of them. And on a Tuesday in November, Ellie went to the bank to ask about a car loan, and a teller with kind eyes and terrible news slid a printout across the counter. The someday account had $91 in it. I came home that night to find every light in the house on and my wife, sitting at the kitchen table with that printout in front of her, flat, smoothed out, like evidence at a trial. And she looked up at me and asked me one question, not where's the money, one better question. The question that still wakes me up some nights. Who have I been kissing goodbye every morning? And friends, I made it worse. Because that's what cornered liars do. I got loud. I got defensive. I said things about her mother always being in our business. She said things about trust that were all true and all knives. And somewhere after midnight, in a kitchen with every light burning, 2 people who loved each other more than anything on this earth said the 2 sentences you can't take back. She said, "I can't believe a single word that comes out of your mouth." And I said, "Then maybe you shouldn't have to." I moved out that weekend, into a garage apartment that smelled like motor oil, and the space where I used to be, Ellie's mother moved into. Dolores Hayes, Ellie's mother. And here is where this story stops being about my sin and starts being about hers. Understand something. Dolores wasn't a monster. She was a frightened woman who had been left by a lying husband 30 years earlier and raised Ellie alone on double shifts and burnt casseroles. When she looked at me, she didn't see Caleb. She saw her own husband walking out the door in 1989. She saw history winding up to repeat itself on her only daughter. So when Ellie sat crying at her mother's kitchen table, it was Dolores who whispered, over and over, like a drumbeat, "He lied for 4 months, baby. A man who lies for 4 months lies forever. He'll ruin you. Sign the papers and be free." And Ellie, heartbroken, exhausted, 30 years old and feeling 70, signed the papers. The divorce was final in late February. 3 days later, 3 days, I need you to hold that number. Ellie stood in her mother's bathroom holding a little plastic test with 2 pink lines on it. She was pregnant. 6 weeks. Which meant that baby had been started before the printout, before the shouting, before the papers. That baby was made by 2 people who still loved each other and didn't know they were about to lose everything. Ellie slid down the bathroom door to the floor, the same way she'd slide down her bedroom wall 7 years later, and she made a decision in that bathroom that would cost all 3 of us 7 years. She decided not to tell me. Now before you judge her, you sit in that bathroom with her for a second. Her mother's voice through the door of her whole life. He lies, he'll ruin you. Men like that use children like chains. Her own heart, freshly amputated. And her pride, that mountain-sized Hayes pride, telling her the one unbearable thought. If you tell him now, you'll never know if he came back for you or for the baby. And she could not survive being someone's obligation. So she carried Maisie alone. Worked a medical billing job through morning sickness. Delivered in October, with her mother holding one hand and the other hand holding nothing. But here's what Ellie didn't know. Here's what she wouldn't know for 6 more years. I wrote to her. The first letter went out in March, 2 weeks after the divorce was final. I wrote it at 2 in the morning at a card table in that garage apartment. I told her I wasn't asking to come back. I told her I'd found steady work. I put a check inside. Not much, but real, and I wrote a sentence I meant with every cell in my body. There's nothing left of me that isn't sorry. I mailed one every month. 12 months, 12 letters, 12 checks, to the house where she lived with her mother, and every single month, Dolores Hayes got to the mailbox first. She recognized my handwriting on the first one, and she stood at that mailbox, and she made her choice. She didn't burn them. I'll never fully understand why. Maybe some part of her knew. Maybe some part of her couldn't. Instead, she carried them inside, 1 per month, and put them in a shoebox on the top shelf of her own closet, under old tax papers, where they sat in the dark. For 6 years, Ellie thought I never once reached out. Not a call, because she'd changed her number. Not a letter, because her mother stood guard at that mailbox like a soldier. She built 7 years of her life on the certainty that I had simply let her go, let them go. And every year that certainty calcified until it wasn't a wound anymore. It was a fact, like gravity. Caleb never looked back. And me, I got 12 months of silence. Not one check cashed, not one word. And I built my 7 years on the opposite certainty. She read them all, and she chose nothing. So I stopped writing. I drifted. I hit a bottom I won't glamorize. There was a stretch where I slept in my car behind a truck stop and ate day-old bread from a dumpster behind a bakery in Columbus. And that dumpster, I swear to you this is true, is where my whole second life began. Because the old man who owned that bakery, a gravel-voiced grouch named Tom Brandt, caught me back there one dawn, looked me up and down, and instead of calling the police, said 7 words that saved my life. "You want the bread warm or not?" Tom put a broom in my hands, then an apron, then a recipe book. Turns out flour and grief mix well. Bread doesn't care if you cry into it at 4 in the morning. 5 years I worked for that man, and when Tom retired, he sold me his second location, the small one, in a little town I'd never heard of, Maple Falls, Ohio. And on every letter I'd ever mailed Ellie, in the top left corner, was my forwarding return address, updated, month after month, ending with the last one, the one that said Maple Falls. Now come back to 11 months ago. Dolores Hayes died in the fall. Her heart, quick and quiet, folding laundry on a Sunday. And Ellie, her only child, packed up her mother's house alone, room by room, box by box, crying into old sweaters, until she reached the closet, the top shelf, the tax papers, and the shoebox. She told me later she knew before she opened it. She said she saw 1 inch of one envelope, 1 inch of my handwriting, and her legs stopped working. 12 letters, postmarked March through February of the worst year of her life, 11 of them sealed. She sat on her dead mother's closet floor and opened the first one with shaking hands, and a 7-year-old check fell into her lap, and she read, "There's nothing left of me that isn't sorry." And Ellie Hayes screamed. Alone in an empty house, she screamed at a dead woman she couldn't even fight with. Because what do you do with rage at someone who just died? Where do you put fury and grief when they arrive holding hands? She had to bury her mother and her mother's crime in the same month. She had to stand at a graveside loving and hating the same woman and tell no one, because the only other person on earth who'd understand was the man in the letters. She couldn't read the other 11. She tried. She physically could not. 11 envelopes stayed sealed. But she memorized one thing from that first envelope, the return address. And here is the answer to the question I asked my dark bakery that Friday night. Why would a broke single mother move to a town where she knew no one? Because 3 months after burying her mother, drowning in her mother's medical debts, with her billing job cutting hours and her lease ending, Ellie spread her options on a kitchen table. And among them, a fact she couldn't stop touching. Cost of living in Maple Falls, Ohio, was cheap. That's what she told herself. Cheap rent. Good school district. That's all. That's all it was. She packed her daughter and her shoebox, and she moved to my town, telling herself the whole drive it was about rent. And then one gray afternoon in her second week, walking Maisie home from her new school, she came around the corner of Birch Street and stopped dead on the sidewalk. Rourke's Bakery. Gold letters on green paint. And through the front window, she saw me, 7 years older, bearded, flour on my forearms, laughing at something a customer said. Laughing. Warm light, full shelves, my name on the glass. And Ellie made the second worst decision of her life, and she made it in 4 seconds flat. She looked at me laughing, and her pride translated it instantly. He healed. He's fine. He built all this after you. Walk in there with your dead mother's debts and your worn-out coat, and you're a ghost showing up to haunt a happy man. You will not be his pity case. Keep walking. She kept walking. She crossed the street every time after that. For months. She grocery shopped the long way. My bakery became the one square of Maple Falls that didn't exist on her map. Until October 3rd, Maisie's 6th birthday. When the money for the party came up short, and the money for a bakery cake came up shorter, and a little girl who'd smelled something magical every time the wind blew up Birch Street took her mother's hand after a birthday dinner of dollar store spaghetti and begged for just one thing. "Can we just look at the cakes, Mommy?" Just look? And Ellie, exhausted, defeated, out of ways to say no on her baby's birthday, looked down that street at the warm gold light, prayed to God I'd already gone home for the night, and said, "Just for a minute, baby, then we have to go." Now you know how they walked into my bakery. So, Friday night. Birthday night. Maisie asleep under 2 blankets. Ellie on her bedroom floor with the shoebox in her lap, and my face. Tonight's face. The bearded one. The one that said, "It's on the house," burning behind her eyes. She took the rubber band off. She lifted out the letters. 12 envelopes. 1 opened, 11 sealed, 7 years old. And her hands hovered over letter number 2. She told me later that she sat there for an hour, that she picked it up and put it down 4 times, because she understood something with perfect, terrible clarity. The woman who opened these letters would not be the same woman afterward. Whatever was in them would knock down 7 years of walls, and those walls were load-bearing. Those walls were holding up her whole life. But then she heard it. Through the thin duplex wall. Maisie, talking in her sleep, the way she did on big days. A little dream mumble, happy, faint, smells like the picture box. And Ellie Hayes looked down at envelope number 2, postmarked April, 7 years ago. She slid her finger under the flap, and she started to read. She read until 3 in the morning, all 11, one by one. And what was inside those letters, what I had written to her, month after month, into what I thought was silence, was about to send a proud, terrified woman back through my bakery door, but not before her 6-year-old daughter got there first, dragging her by the hand. 3 days later, on a Tuesday, because Maisie Hayes had unfinished business with the cake man, and this time, when the bell above my door rang, it wasn't just a birthday cake that was about to change, it was everything. Tuesday afternoon, 3 days after the birthday cake. 4 minutes past 3 o'clock. The bell above my door rang, and a 6-year-old hurricane in a pink jacket blew into my bakery, dragging her mother by the hand like a tugboat pulling a battleship that did not want to come to shore. "Cake man!" Maisie announced to the entire store. "We came to say thank you!" Mommy said we have to say it with our mouths, and not just in our hearts. Behind her, Ellie stood in the doorway, holding a foil-wrapped plate, looking like a woman standing at the edge of a high dive. Her eyes were swollen, not crying today swollen, crying for 3 nights swollen. I knew that face. I didn't know yet that she'd spent those 3 nights reading 11 letters in my handwriting until the sun came up. "Banana bread," she said, setting the plate on my counter without meeting my eyes. It's nothing compared to what you do. But we pay our debts. In this family, we pay our debts." I looked at that foil plate, and I understood exactly what it was. It wasn't banana bread. It was a treaty. It was pride, finding a door it could walk through. So I did the smartest thing I have ever done in my life. I didn't say, "You didn't have to." I didn't say, "It was nothing." I peeled back the foil, broke off a corner right there in front of her, ate it, and said, "You still put the coffee in it." Her eyes snapped up to mine, because that was it, the secret from our old kitchen. A spoon of instant coffee in the batter, the thing she invented when we were 23 and broke. A stranger couldn't know that. And in her eyes, just for a second, I watched 7 years crack. "Some habits survive," she said quietly. "The good ones do," I said. And that was Tuesday 1. You'd think everything changed right there. It didn't. Real life doesn't melt 7 years of ice with one warm sentence. What actually happened was smaller and slower and better. It happened in Tuesdays. Maisie's school had a reading program at the library right across the street from my bakery, every Tuesday until 5. So I started sending day-old muffins over to the pickup table. I told myself it was for all the kids. It was for one kid. And that one kid, unstoppable as weather, started dragging her mother through my door every Tuesday afternoon to supervise quality. Ellie came armored. Every time. Insisted on paying for her coffee. Every time. And every time, I let her. Because I'd finally learned the thing I should have learned 8 years ago. You don't fight this woman's pride. Her pride kept her and that little girl alive for 7 years. You don't bulldoze a wall like that. You make room beside it. And you wait. So the Tuesdays stacked up like pancakes. Maisie appointed herself junior taste tester, then apprentice, and one gray afternoon in November, I stood her on a milk crate at my work table and taught her to braid dough. Flour got in her curls. She stuck out her tongue when she concentrated, the exact way my mother used to, and I had to grip the edge of the table because my knees actually went weak. Old Tom Brandt was there that day, delivering supplies, and he watched me watching her, and that gravel-voiced grouch pulled me into the back room and said, "Son, I've seen you look at bread for 12 years. You've never looked at bread like that." I told him he was crazy. He grunted, "Uh-huh," and squeezed my shoulder on his way out, and that squeeze said everything his mouth didn't. And Ellie thawed, by centimeters. A real laugh in late November, the first one, at Maisie wearing a flower handprint on her forehead like a badge, and I swear that laugh hit my bloodstream like sunlight. Then small talk turned into medium talk. Then one Tuesday she stayed 20 minutes after Maisie's pickup time just arguing with me about whether cinnamon belongs in coffee, and neither of us noticed the clock, and that's when I knew the wall had a window in it now. But walls don't come down without one last fight. And ours came in early December, and it was my fault, and it almost ended everything, because I got greedy. Things were good, and good made me brave, and brave made me stupid. One quiet Tuesday, while Maisie was across the street, I refilled Ellie's coffee and asked, as gently as I knew how, "Can I ask about Maisie's dad?" The temperature in that bakery dropped 40 degrees. "He's not in the picture," she said. Flat, final, a door slamming. "Ellie, we should go." She was already standing, already winding her scarf, already gone. "Thank you for the coffee." She skipped the next Tuesday. And the one after that. 2 weeks of silence, and I spiraled into the darkest math a man can do. He's not in the picture. So there was a man, some man who made that beautiful child, and then walked away, and left them with worn-out shoes, and a coat with a missing button. I lay awake, hating a ghost. I hated him with a fury that scared me. And friends, hold on to that fury, because in about 90 seconds you're going to watch it turn around and look me dead in the face. Then came the snowstorm, the second Friday of December. It rolled in fast at 4 o'clock, the kind of Ohio squall that turns the sky the color of dishwater and closes everything early. My phone rang at 4:30, unknown number. It was the library. Ellie had listed my bakery as Maisie's emergency backup pickup weeks ago, and never told me. Sit with that a second. That proud, guarded woman had written my name on a form under the words, "Person I Trust," and couldn't say it out loud. Her billing office was holding her late. The roads were a mess. Could Maisie wait with me? Could she? So Maisie sat at my window table in the glow of the string lights, drinking hot chocolate with a whipped cream mustache, watching the snow eat the street lights, while I closed down the kitchen. And at some point, she wandered over to my menu board, the big chalkboard, my prices, my pastries, and she read it, the slow, careful way 6-year-olds read, lips moving. And then she stopped. "Cake man," she said. "Why is the cinnamon roll called the Ellie?" My hands stopped moving in the flour bin. 5 years. That name had been on my board. Tom asked me once why. Customers asked. I always shrugged and said it sounded friendly. The truth was that I built that recipe in my first winter of owning this place. Extra cinnamon, a little orange zest, because it tasted like Sunday mornings in a tiny apartment with a woman who sang badly while she burned toast, and naming it after her was the only way I had left to say her name out loud. "That's my mom's name," Maisie said. Not suspicious, just true. The way children hand you truth like it weighs nothing. "I named it," I said, and my voice came out rough, "after someone I loved a long time ago." Maisie nodded, absorbing this. Then she climbed onto the stool across from me, put her chin in her hands, looked at me with those brown and gold eyes, and dropped the bomb the whole universe had been carrying toward me for 6 years. "My mom keeps a picture of you in a shoebox. You had less beard. You look happier now, though." The bakery went silent. except for the snow ticking against the glass. Maisie, I said, very carefully, the way you walk when the floor might not be there. When's your birthday? Tell me again. October 3rd. You know that. You gave me the cake. October 3rd. And the divorce final, the last week of February. I stood at my work table and did the math for the 100th time, but this time I did it with a photograph in a shoebox. With eyes that had flecks of gold like mine. With a tongue that stuck out in concentration like my mother's. With he's not in the picture. And the fury I'd been aiming at a ghost for 2 weeks turned slowly around and pointed straight at me. There was no other man. There had never been another man. The father who wasn't in the picture was standing in this kitchen with flour on his hands. The bell rang. Ellie came through my door, snow-dusted and breathless, apologies already spilling, and then she stopped, because she saw me. Sitting very still at the window table, where Maisie had fallen asleep against my arm, her curls on my sleeve, my heart directly under her ear, and Ellie looked at my face, and I looked at hers, and no words happened, because none were needed. She knew that I knew. She carried Maisie to her car, buckled her in with the engine running and the heat on, and came back inside. Into my kitchen. And there, standing between the proof racks and the big oven, in the warmest room in Maple Falls, we finally had the conversation that was 7 years late. No shouting. That's what I want you to understand. Everybody thinks these moments are shouting. They're not. They're two people standing very still because they're each holding something enormous and glass. Is she mine? I asked. And Ellie Hayes, who had carried it alone through morning sickness and delivery rooms and first steps and fevers at 3 a.m. and 6 birthdays, looked at me and let it go with one word. Yes. I sat down on a flour barrel because my legs quit. I had a daughter. I had a 6-year-old daughter, and I had missed everything. And the whys came pouring out of me. Why, Ellie, why didn't you tell me? I wrote to you. I wrote to you every month for a year. And she went white. You? What? And I watched my ex-wife realize that I didn't know she knew. And the next night, after her shift, she came back to the bakery carrying an old brown shoebox, and she set it on my work table, and she said, "You need to see what my mother did." Friends, I read my own 12 letters that night. 7 years old, 11 of them opened only days before by the woman watching me from across the table. I read the man I used to be begging into what he thought was silence. And when I got to the 4th one, the one where I wrote, "If you ever need anything, even at 3 a.m., even in 10 years, my door doesn't lock for you," I heard Ellie make a sound I'd never heard from her before, and I looked up, and we were both crying in a bakery kitchen at midnight over the wreckage of a war nobody had won. Nobody betrayed anybody, I finally said. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I thought you read them and chose silence. You thought I never wrote. We were both faithful to people who didn't exist. We got robbed, Ellie. Your mother, my pride, your pride. We got robbed. I can't even scream at her, Ellie whispered. She's gone. She stole 7 years and then she died. And I have to love her and hate her in the same breath. And there's nowhere to put it. Then put it down, I said. Both of us. Right here. Because I can't hate her. Hating her means hating half of you. And I've tried hating you for 7 years, Ellie. I'm no good at it. Ask the cinnamon rolls. And she laughed. A broken, soggy, beautiful laugh, right in the middle of crying, and that laugh was the sound of a wall coming down. I asked her for only one thing that night. Not a second chance. Not dinner. I said, let me know my daughter. Everything else can take whatever time it takes. I've got nothing but time and bread. And time is what we took. Because listen to me. The fairy tale isn't that we kissed at midnight and skipped to a wedding. The fairy tale is slower and better than that. It was winter into spring. It was pancake Saturdays, and me learning that Maisie sleeps with one sock on, always the left. It was the father-daughter dance in February that I attended as Mom's friend Caleb, until Maisie, in front of God and the whole gymnasium, loudly renegotiated my job title. It was March, when Ellie's office cut her hours to 0. And instead of rescuing her, because you cannot rescue Ellie Hayes, you'll lose a hand, I slid a ledger across the counter and said, my books are a crime scene. I'm not hiring my ex-wife. I'm hiring the only person I've ever trusted with money more than myself." And she looked at that ledger for a long minute, and she took the job. And working side by side, the old rhythm came back like a song you thought you'd forgotten. Bickering over supplier invoices, closing up in the dark, and one evening in April, both of us reaching into the flour bin at the same moment, our hands met, and neither one of us pulled away. And that, right there, hands in the flour, no words, was the moment I knew. 1 year after a little girl pressed her nose against my glass case, on a Friday evening in October, Rourke's Bakery closed early. Folding chairs, string lights, 30 people, Tom Brandt in a tie that was strangling him, crying and denying it. And in front of that display case, the exact spot where a whisper said, "We can't pay," I married Ellie for the second time, with our daughter standing between us as ring bearer and self-declared cake supervisor. The cake was strawberry cream, 3 layers, lopsided because Maisie helped bake it, and perfect because Maisie helped bake it. And at the end of the night, my daughter, walked over to the display case one last time, pressed her nose against the glass out of pure tradition, then turned around and looked up at her mother and me, with those gold-flecked eyes. "We don't have to just smell it anymore, right?" And Ellie took my hand, wearing my ring for the second time in her life, and said, "No, baby, this one's ours. Some things you lose to pride. Some things come back to you smelling like strawberries. And if you're lucky, and I was, once, at closing time on a Friday, you get to keep the second kind forever." Before you go, I want to ask you something. And I want you to answer honestly, in the quiet of your own heart. Is there someone in your life you walked away from, based on a story you were never able to verify? A silence you interpreted as rejection, that might have been someone else's interception? Ellie and I lost 7 years, not because we stopped loving each other, but because we each believed a lie that pride never let us question. So ask yourself, is your pride protecting you right now, or is it just guarding an empty room? Here's what I've learned, and I give it to you for free. No $20 bill required. Pride will keep you warm. Exactly never. It will stand guard over your loneliness and call it dignity. But love, real love, is not humiliated by asking, by apologizing, by showing up 7 years late with shaking hands. The strongest thing my wife ever did wasn't surviving alone. It was walking back through my door, holding banana bread and a broken heart. So if there's a phone call you've been too proud to make, a letter you've been too hurt to send, a door you've been crossing the street to avoid, let this story be your sign. Make the call. Send the letter. Walk through the door. Because somewhere out there, someone might be baking a cake every single Friday, just in case you ever come home. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, who are you going to call? God bless you, and remember, it's never too late to smell the strawberries.